Hello, everybody. Welcome to a live edition of First Ring Daily, where there's some things to be aware of.
No, just my unkempt collars.
I'll tell you what, Paul. Today was a significant blow to my life. Saying, I believe this is being A/B tested, but the fact that Microsoft is now attempting putting ads into the Mail app on Windows 10 almost made me throw my laptop out the window into the snow.
I got to be honest. I mean, I'll be outraged about this because I always am. But no, this is just an escalation that's been going on forever, right? I mean, I first used the term slippery slope when they added advertising to what was then called the Bing apps in Windows 8, right? So 2012, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was suddenly that's 6 years ago,
Yeah.
And the point of my comment was once you go down this path, it's just going to get worse, And it has, right? Ads have appeared everywhere. There have been some that have been so outrageous that people pushed back during the Insider program, and they actually decided to scale back. Remember that craziness, the on-install stuff for Chrome, when the advertisement for Microsoft Edge would come out. They actually stepped back from the cliff on that one. But yeah, it's frustrating. And even more frustrating than the actual act is that there were people out there who are just fine with this, or they'll just kind of rationalize it. Like, what do you expect? They just keep upgrading you for free.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for it anymore. So this is how you pay for it. Like, excuse me, that was Microsoft's scheme. I didn't agree to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather pay for this thing every 3 years. Nobody wanted this. This is not something we all said. Yeah, put advertising in the product, and Windows will just be free forever. Let's not. No.
Well, obviously, to build on that, if you go buy a new laptop, it comes with Windows 10. You just paid for Windows 10.
Yeah.
Not directly,
we're still
but
paying
you did.
for Windows 10. Yep.
Yeah, if this shows up on my production machine, you're gonna see a mental breakdown via a Mail app.
Well, so obviously you were using, or maybe you still are using Newton Mail, so you kind of moved past that. But before that, and maybe since then, you have used Windows Mail. It's interesting how, in fact, cynically, you could almost imagine somewhere in Redmond, someone was like, guys, there are a lot of people using this app. Let's monetize it, I don't know. This past week I got a Mac, the MacBook Air.
Yep. And
in the process of putting apps on it, I had been using this application that was like see a lot of this in the Mac App Store. It's basically like an application front end for a web app. So in this case, it was for Google Inbox, right? I think it's called Boxy, like Boxy Inbox, right? So I paid for it. It was probably maybe $5 or less. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Inbox is going was going away. And so when you bring up the app for the first time, it says, hey, by the way, this thing's going away soon, but we have this other thing we're going to start selling called Boxy Suite, which is basically a web wrap or a native app wrapper on top of Gmail and then one on top of Google Calendar. And I said, well, cool, I'll buy this thing. And for now, I'm still using the Boxy Inbox because I prefer that app. But, as that goes away early next year, I'm going to have to switch over. But here's the point of the story. I paid for this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mind paying for things like this. The point is not that, email should be free or whatever. I don't know the Windows. Well, I don't know because I haven't looked in a while. But I know you have. But based on my experience in the past, the quality of the third-party email applications in the Microsoft Store is not high. On the Mac side, I know from having just looked that you see a lot of these web wrappers. It's kind of a big thing in that space for some reason, and I don't know why, but I'm gonna just get rid of the cat there. I'm not in the mood for this today. She hears my voice and she just thinks this is the time I'm going to get petted in front of the camera for some reason. Whatever, the thing is, it's not a shell around the web app. There is that actually, but they actually add native app features to the thing too. Like, so there's some value being added here. They're not just wrapping it, and I don't mind. What I do mind is putting an ad into something that was previously free and didn't have ads, and not giving someone the opportunity to not do that.
Yeah.
In the Microsoft space, you could kind of make the argument, well, if you're an Office 365 subscriber, you shouldn't see ads in that app. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the way they're going to go. I don't know. They've never done that. It's just there are better approaches.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at this Boxy suite because if it does happen, my biggest challenge is that I kind of hate the way Gmail looks. Is my problem.
Yeah,
Like,
me too. Which is why I'm using Boxy Inbox still as the email app, because I really, really hate the way Gmail looks.
yeah, it's just
When
I don't know why they have to like break things out. It's like, oh look, you can click directly on the attachment without having to open the email, but the UI just looks like a dumpster fire. I don't know.
No, it's terrible. And when they first announced they were getting rid of Inbox, I wrote an article about this. I was like, I am not using Gmail. Screw this. And I've been experimenting with different solutions since. I saw today that Engadget or Gizmodo or one of those type of sites just woke up to this as well. They wrote an article, something along the lines of, it turns out a lot of people who use Inbox hate Gmail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, because it's terrible. And I know. I'm not happy about this.
Well, good. Well, you can welcome to my neighborhood of pain and suffering every time you look at an email.
Yeah. I wish those kind of apps were at least available in the Microsoft Store, you know?
Yeah.
The Mac App Store is a weird thing, and the Mac, app ecosystem is kind of a weird thing. There's this weird preponderance of different app types that we just don't see a lot of on the Windows side. For some reason, there are 3,000 different Markdown editors. There are 3,000 different note-taking apps, from different, like everyone from Bob on the corner to some big company. I'm sure it's because Mac users are so creative or something. I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems like these things are just basic productivity tools, and it is a fact that the Windows user base is about 1,000 times bigger. I mean, I don't quite understand why this stuff shows up on the Mac,
Yeah. Well, here we are.
Yeah.
Other minor things happening. I posted something about this console back here, but we don't need to talk about that.
I was like, other minor things. Brad.
Yeah. So this was supposed to just be in the book. This is actually how I came upon this stuff was while working on the book with BeneathTheSurface.com. And I stumbled, whatever, fell face first into some Microsoft content where they were talking about an Xbox One S without a disk drive. And so I kept poking around, and it's like, oh, hey, they're actually building this thing. And so here's the short story. Microsoft's building an Xbox One S without a disk drive. And if you're freaking out because you have a very tall stack of games and you won't be able to play it on that is not true. They're working on what they call disk to digital. And basically, long story short, you take the disk, you walk into a store, they take the disk, they give you a digital entitlement, you go download the game, and you have all your games digitally on your device. And
Right.
that should be coming. I keep hearing that it's on track for production for sometime in like spring to summer 2019-ish, sometimes around there. The big thing here is they're trying to lower the price as much as possible. I was told or whatever, speculating that it will be below $199. I'm almost positive it will, because people are like, well, you can get an Xbox One S for around that price. I think it's going to be lower. I think that was just the top end it could be, and that might even be the top end SKU of it potentially. But when you pull out that drive, what most people are trying to do the math, like, well, how expensive is a Blu-ray drive? Well, it's not just the drive. You got to remember they have to pay for licensing too on each device.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
yeah.
I have not purchased or used a single game disc the entire time I've owned the Xbox One X.
Same.
And I think Xbox One S, probably the same. And then Xbox One in general, if you go back to the very beginning, I think I bought one game just to test it for some reason. And then I've used like a Blu-ray in it or whatever just to see what that was like. But when we talk, I wrote an article about this, Monday or maybe Tuesday in the wake of X018 this past weekend, about how that event they had was almost like a commercial, which these events often are. It was kind of like an E3 keynote type thing.
Yep.
But more specifically, it was almost like a commercial for Xbox Game Pass, right?
Sure.
Not every game they talked about, but it was like Xbox Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass, and the kind of day one stuff they're doing. And there's all these little incremental steps you can see that are ways that Microsoft gets to this future we keep talking about, where everything is digitally delivered or streamed or whatever. Heterogeneous devices, you don't have to worry about the Xbox console. The ability to, like Microsoft's Xbox backward compatibility technology plays into this, right? Because we have games that were made for some platform, but they might be being played somewhere else. on something else, or stream via something else. How do we make that work? There's the ability to download things before they're available, so they're ready to go the day they're available, right? Which is not like a huge technology problem, but it's still a step to how do we get to this thing. And what you're describing here, this ability to take a collection of disk-based games and get them transferred to digital licenses that are associated with your Microsoft account, this is a huge step to that future, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the enabler, and that kind of gamer-friendly perspective of your investment carries forward, right, is so beautiful. And once you've gone digital, it's just automatic. It's just associated with your account. It's good.
Yeah. And for those people who are freaking out because they still want to buy disc games, Microsoft is actually working on an Xbox One S revision, which I don't think will ship until late 2019. And to be honest, we may not be able to tell the difference. I think that this is just an update of the internal guts, just kind of streamlining things, just, again, trying to lower the cost of the device. And that'll be coming.
They do this all the time.
Yeah, they
Sony
do.
does this all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the stories I had a week ago was that the PS4 has been revved, PS4 Pro has been revved, I think it was 2 or 3 times since the initial release. And all of it is done, it's done to reduce the cost of the device, because obviously every time they sell one, they make more from it. But also, in the case of the PS4, it was done to reduce the noise, because that thing is really loud. And they've been kind of quietly trying to address that. But to look at the device, you don't really see a difference. It's the same form factor. On the Xbox side, you've seen those costs reduced. Xbox One S, by the way, it was the first cost-reduced version of the Xbox One. With the Xbox 360, there were a number of revisions, and the final version was the one that kind of looked different from all the other ones. It was more kind of a rounded rectangle thing. It didn't have that kind of, the iconic, swoopy, look of the Xbox 360. Again, but just the point of all this was to reduce costs.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't grab this earlier, but I mean, I honestly, so what I've heard is that it's quite literally just like this, but without this. That's just there's no real differentiator on the outside. Obviously, that could change. Exterior stuff is very simple, but there
are reasons to keep it the same.
Yeah, thermals being a big one.
Yeah, if you've already solved a problem, like why introduce another problem where this new version of the console looks different, all of a sudden has worse thermals or whatever it might be, or is loud, or there's some thing that doesn't work, whatever it might be. Plus, for peripherals and things, power supplies, stands, whatever you want, keeping it the same, there's some advantage to it.
Yeah,
as long as it's not like the giant tank thing they had the first time. That's stupid.
Well, there's
much more.
The old VCR was
I'm surprised it didn't top load the games.
Now that would have been a neat feature if you could, whatever. So anyways, that should be coming, I don't know, I think sometime next year, probably around the springtime, which is real convenient because actually Sony announced that they are not going to be at E3. And if Microsoft does ship new hardware and they get a nice big cycle, I think it's going to be good things for Microsoft, obviously.
Well, on the other hand, you have to kind of speculate that why would Sony skip E3 after 20-something years? Probably because they're going to introduce the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the rumors that the PlayStation 5 may not be unveiled until 2020, but it could just be that they're going to have their own event too. That's always a possibility as well.
Right.
Because, I mean, realistically, Microsoft doesn't need to be at E3. They could have their own event and people would show up. Same with Sony.
Having people show up to an event, I don't think even matters. The big thing here is when you stream it. Like I said, the E3 press conference is just a hour and 40-minute long commercial. It's just game. And I'm sure it's premiere. Awesome. Yeah, you're right, exactly. Console exclusive, whatever it is. I'm sure it's cool for the people that go there from Microsoft. And I'm sure it's cool for the people that go there just to see the stuff because live audiences are awesome or whatever. But I mean, honestly, that what matters long term is not the people in the room. It's the games. And so you could just do this virtually. Yeah,
we will. Only Sony really knows what they're doing, and maybe they are just kind of saying, "Hey, this generation is wrapping up." Maybe that's why they announced.
It'd be really expensive to go to E3 too for Sony. Yeah. Imagine the billions and millions of dollars that must cost.
Oh, I'm sure it's not cheap to do that because I mean, they not only do they have to rent a studio or whatever a place, Then they have to
Right.
put all that crap together and bring
There's
all those
parties and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And it actually, what this reminds me of is when Apple dropped out of Macworld, right? And the reason they did that was because they had to adhere to what to them was an artificial schedule that they didn't create. So they had to show up whenever this show was, January, and I think there was one in the summer or spring or something. And they had to announce stuff, and they were like, we're not always ready on that schedule. We have our own schedules. Sometimes Apple likes to take 7 years before they update a product. So, having something every January, whatever the schedule was, is not necessarily the ideal for them.
Yeah, and that's actually very plausible as well. I didn't even think about that I don't know. Maybe announcing things in, what is it, June, just isn't a good time to do it. Very well could be that.
Yeah, right. I've always thought that. Well, think back to they did this with the iPhone, which was announced in January because of a Macworld, and then didn't ship till June. There was the original iPad, which was announced in, I think, January, but didn't come out until April or whatever time frame it was. I think you lose a little bit of momentum when you have that much time, and you could also get people who second guess purchases when they have too much time to think about it. Right? You put a bunch of money down on an iPad or a console or whatever it might be. And then 5 months goes by, or maybe you don't even put it down. It doesn't really matter. But then over time, you're like, I don't know. I don't really need this thing. Like, why did I order this? And you just kind of don't do it now. I don't know. I don't.
I wonder when I would have to think that the biggest selling time of the year for games and stuff has got to be like right about now. Like it's got to be ramping up, probably right up until December 24th or something like that.
Yep. And I don't follow the Sony stuff close enough to know this, but I know on the Microsoft side, there have been some high-profile disappointments when games that are really eagerly anticipated are delayed. I think that happened to Cuphead. It's absolutely happened to Crackdown 3 more recently.
Multiple times.
Well, that's the thing. Like you kind of announce something, and then the next year, E3 comes around, and you announce it again. And like you start to look kind of stupid when that stuff happens. So I don't know if that actually happens to Sony, but it must happen sometimes.
Yeah. Well, wasn't it not GTA? What was their big Gran Turismo? That used to be their massive racing game that they would release, and I think GT5 was delayed multiple times.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember, but it seems like it would happen.
Yeah, because I think it did. And then one other thing here, Paul, we've been asked this multiple times if there's going to be an audible version of the book.
Right.
And, a couple thoughts. Obviously, if we can do it easily, sure, why not? The biggest challenge right now is we got to get this thing, I got to get this thing done and shipped and out the door. Because I have no idea what an audible version entails and how we would execute it.
I can't even imagine what the recording process is. I find myself drained, when I do Windows Weekly. It's 2 hours of talking, and I don't know. I get it, and I have to say, I don't know if you read the thing I wrote this morning because this came up in the Ask Paul
a little
article,
bit, yeah.
But, there's a David Cross audiobook. David Cross is a comedian and an actor. He was in Arrested Development, and he wrote a book that was called something like, I forgot the name of it, like This Is Why I Drank, or something like that. I used to listen to it when I travel, and he's funny, and there's a great section about the Belushi, which is Jim Belushi, who's terrible. But what he did in this audiobook, and I've listened to tons of audiobooks, and this is kind of unique to me at least, was he would just be reading from the book as you do. That's the audiobook, and then he would kind of pause and just go off on this side thing that wasn't in the book, and it was just kind of like, the other thing I remember about this or whatever, or just as an aside, he would tell these stories, and I thought, that's actually kind of cool. And the question from the reader today kind of asked about that kind of thing. Like maybe, if I read the book, maybe I could interview you, or you could, we could interject from time to time with other things. And it's kind of interesting. And so I'll just say this, I don't want to commit to anything. And I know you don't. I mean, certainly it's up to you, actually.
We're going to put you on the spot. Yes. What are you committing to?
Because God knows I am now doing a daily podcast because of this kind of conversation. I want to be really clear. I'm not committing to this. I'm not saying I want to do this, but I think it may be worth exploring some kind of thing. It could be audio or video where you could just do this by yourself. I mean, I'm not trying to interject myself into your project, but I mean, having like a further discussion around things. Like I actually kind of, like I told you the other day, and I think I said this on the show, because of your book, I went back and I started watching some of these old Microsoft events, like the original Surface event, the Windows 8 launch. And I talked about how terrible Sanofsky was. And it occurred to me that as a period of history, this stuff is actually really interesting. And it's a little far back now enough that it may be worth some retrospective analysis kind of thing, because, not all of the ideas were bad. I mean, honestly, Windows 8 is fondly remembered as a car crash of a certain kind, but there are ideas there. I think as far as like quality goes, you kind of say, that the nutso Nazi guy ran the show. I mean, there were no problems for sure. Except for the product was terrible. But as far as quality, right? So I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there might be the germ of an idea there. I don't want to assume it for myself, or assume that I'm part of it. But I do think it's a good idea.
I do agree. There's something there. I just need to better understand what the overhead is to get that done and how we do it. And somebody just recommended you just read it in your bedroom with your cat scratching you the entire time.
Could it? You're right. I think the question is, how unprofessional could it be?
Yeah.
What's the
floor?
What level? It's like I'm out walking around and I'm just reading it as I walk, and I bump into things or cars go by. I don't know.
Chapter 17, Red in the Side Streets of New York City. There's just
yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's an idea. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody recommends doing it for premium, like as a premium podcast session, because there's 26 chapters. Although the first chapter probably, well, I guess it could.
I'm all over the map on this one. I'm sorry. We just watched a show on Amazon called Homecoming.
Yep.
Which is based on a podcast series called Homecoming, which, by the way, is notable for a number of reasons, but maybe the biggest one would be that the star power, like the actual actors who are in the podcast, is bigger than that of the show. Like if you go look at the cast, it's kind of incredible how many famous people are in it. But anyway, it did make me think, like, the show was good enough that it made me kind of want to go back and think about listening to the podcast. I don't know how far the stories differ or where they differ, or if the podcast goes on for longer in the storyline than the show does. I don't know anything about it. I had never heard of the show. But when I saw those people, when I saw who was involved with it, I was thinking to myself, this is clearly a really professional production they did. It was. I listened to the little beginning of it. I was like, this is really well done. And it does kind of make me wonder if we could hire famous actors to do this instead of me. No, if we could, if there isn't something cool we could do around audio, maybe it just needs to be you and me in smoking jackets, sit in front of a fire with slippers on, just taking turns reading it and discussing it.
This one's your page.
Yeah. I can't go through this. You're going to have to do this.
I don't know. We'll figure out something eventually. Again,
it's an idea. It's a good idea.
It is.
I'm not committing, like I said, but.
Yeah. Well, you got to reread it again this weekend anyways. Maybe just start there.
Yeah, right. After my second pass through, I might be like, you know what? I think I'm kind of done with this story.
Yeah.
We should write about Windows Phone next. That would be hilarious. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end.
That could be a 3-part series, to be honest. You could have to buy 3 books. Right. Have to reboot each time.
Yeah, like Surface is this really big story, so it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings. And then you have Windows Phone, which isn't as big of a story, but we're going to expand it out. Like, we're going to pretend it's really big.
And every time you think you're getting to a good part, the book's just going to end, and then you're going to have to start all over again with a different...
Right. Oh, boy, they tried, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, man. All right, you got anything else for the day, Mr. Thurrott?
Just one more thing. I did get the HP Folio, Spectre Folio, Spectre Folio, whatever it's called. This thing, the leather computer.
Looks like a clipboard.
Yeah, which is kind of the point, right? So I'll have a first impressions article about this up today, but I guess I won't ruin the surprise of this, but I do want to point out that the machine is notable because it's made of leather. It's like this weird Frankenwood kind of thing. But actually, there's a much bigger innovation going on here that I think will have ramifications for the 2-in-1 / convertible space going forward. So You'll have to read the article to find out what that is.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun. And when's that article going to be done?
Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know.
Oh,
No, today. It'll be today.
It's a good thing you brought that up. I don't think you know this, or maybe I do. I can't remember what I tell you and what I don't tell you. There's going to be no podcast Monday.
No, why is that?
I am going to Washington, D.C. for the day.
Why is that?
Business meeting.
Okay. Could you be more mysterious and vague?
Petri business planning for 2019.
Is in Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Wow, I love Washington, D.C., but you know what I don't want to do? Sit in a meeting about Petri. What do you call it? Petri
planning for 2019.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
You sound terrible.
Did I just walk around DC and take photos and then send them back to you guys?
Only if they're taken at a 90 perpendicular and not at a 45 like you like.
I think it's 30-40% of them will be taken at that angle. Sure. Okay.
All right, folks.
Anyway,
Well, that wraps it up for today. We'll be back on Tuesday, and have yourselves a wonderful weekend. And next week, actually, will be completely chopped up because I kind of forgot that Thanksgiving here in the U.S. is on Thursday. So we will be slicing and dicing that podcast schedule. But have yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll catch you back next time.